in the multiverse, you can live up to your ultimate potential.
What's happening?
You discovered a way to temporarily link your consciousness to another version of yourself. Accessing all of the memories and skills. It's called verse jumping. There's a great evil spreading throughout the many verses. And you may be your only chance of stopping it.
It's crazy.
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So, rewatching it today, any new revelations?
No, I was like not paying attention to it. I don't know how you rewatched it, but I was just here at my computer station working.
I kind of did the same thing.
And off to the side, and it's indecipherable without. It's like it's a visual movie through and through.
Yeah.
Very weak dialogue, not a lot of like dialogue all the way through. Lots of squelching sounds, like that comes through like pretty hard.
Squelching?
Oh yeah, like like
What do you mean?
dildos shaking or just
A lot of sound design.
that scene in particular. Yeah, so I didn't really get much out of it on the rewatch, honestly.
I'll be honest, I didn't really get much out of my rewatch either. And I think that's partially due to the not real time of day that I gave it. But I think it's also just like not as strong of a movie as everybody wants it to be.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like this movie at all. I'm kind of offended by it, that I feel like it's such a waste of time, that it just doesn't grab my attention. I have so many issues with it.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about all these issues.
Okay. I did take notes. I did that much.
Okay.
Here's one that jumps out at me.
Okay.
Drags for like 80% of the movie. I mean, it is a real slog to get through. I mean, it basically, like in my mind, just bird's eye view, there's like the beginning section of the movie where things are getting set up, and then it goes crazy, and then I can't like break it down to any more level of detail than that. It's such a like barrage of images and action sequences.
Yeah.
It feels like not well structured.
It is sort of like, as far as setting itself up, it takes a really long time to do that. First of all, to like really get to the meat of what's going on. I guess the whole movie is sort of a progression in that way. It's just like building up to like the ultimate like power up that Michelle you like experiences, right? She goes like full Neo at the end. And it's really sort of like up its own ass about like how much I care about like the progress from point A to point B.
Yeah.
You know, it spends a lot of time like explaining to me how the whole like multiverse thing works, and I just don't care.
I feel like
it's not an interesting enough lore for me to really like sink my teeth into like the mechanics of it.
Right.
Like I'm normally in sci-fi type of movies, or like, you know, mind bender type of movies, whatever you want to call it. I'm totally like game to like just nerd out on whatever it is, regardless of how stupid it is. But this movie is like an exception to that rule. Like I just couldn't care less about how it works.
Well, I feel like the movie doesn't really take itself too seriously as far as like the sci-fi elements, because it pulls this kind of flip card by the end where it's like, well, actually, all of this was about family. And you're like, oh, okay, so you didn't really care about the sci-fi concepts like throughout.
It is sort of like just a big jokey movie. Like the whole movie is a joke on purpose. And like it sort of has the effect of like, it's not a comedy per se. I mean, it is like a comedy, I guess, but the movie is better described as like one big singular joke. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like when you go to a comedian, if you like a comedian and you've seen him like multiple times, you'll hear like the same material again, and it's never the same like after hearing it once already. And I think on my second viewing, I just like don't care. Like I get the joke and I'm over it.
Yeah. It's worse on the second viewing, but it's really monotonous. Really, really monotonous.
Yeah. Also seemed to be, I realized a movie that was like better taken in like in a theatrical environment.
Yeah.
Like I saw it with like a group of people and everyone like reacted to it. But like sitting at home alone in like my basement, like watching it, I'm like, this is dumb.
I agree. Yeah, so we're kind of on the same page here. Not to say that I didn't like that first theater experience that I had. Thoroughly positive. I mean,
Yeah, I had the same thing. Yeah.
but I had a lot of the same simmering thoughts at that time too, where I was like, I don't know if this really came together as something that I enjoyed. It was very like the whole point of it is like this multiverse kind of narrative structure, but in practice, all that means is just like it feels like a montage, like just it's constantly switching from like different clips throughout.
Yeah.
And that's so exhausting.
Yeah.
I have a way that I'm trying to like explain it. Do you know, like in a
Okay.
Marvel or like an action movie, like towards the climax of the end, there's usually like a 5 to 10 minute segment of the movie where it's just continuously like flipping through all the characters and what they're doing, or like a Stranger Things episode where you're like at the finale episode where it's just constantly it's like, okay,
all the splintering timelines or
Right.
all the subplots that are all happening simultaneously.
and it's just cycling through them, and you're kind of like progressing slowly. I'm just like moving my finger right now. You're like, okay, this storyline, move it forward an inch, go to the next one, move it forward an inch, and you're just doing this like for 30 minutes. And that's, I always think that's like the worst thing to experience
Yeah.
when watching stuff, and this whole movie feels like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of putting it, actually. I don't know. This movie, I was more forgiving of that because I was familiar with the two guys, the directors, more so for their music videos.
Uh-huh.
Didn't they do like Swiss Army Man, that like Daniel Radcliffe movie, where he's like a dead guy? Do you know
I
what I'm
haven't
talking
seen
about?
it, but yeah, I've heard about him. I listened to a podcast interview with them, and they were describing it. I'm like, this is a weird concept.
Was it like it was probably like the A24 podcast, because I think I listened to that same thing, because it's them and Daniel Radcliffe, if I remember right.
Nah, I listened to the Mark Maron interview.
Oh, okay. Well, in any case, I listened to a podcast about it, and I think I learned all I needed to about that movie in that interview, which is to say I don't need to watch it at all. So that aside, the other two things, like the Lil Jon and the Shins music videos.
You know, that Shin's music video, Simple Life?
Yeah, or Simple Song.
Simple Song. That music video and song were huge for me when they came out. I think I was in high school probably.
Oh yeah, those two things rule together. Like the song's great, and then the music video is like real interesting.
Yeah. I just thought I'd put that out there. Very like nostalgic.
Formative.
Yeah, very formative.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I really liked that music video. I think I only absorbed the two like my freshman or sophomore year of college, when they come out, like 2012 or something.
Well,
11.
This is a simple song.
But like it's maybe like one of the cooler music videos I've seen. Same thing with Lil Jon. Very creative and very like kind of rapid and like bombastic in the way that it's shot and edited. It feels very music video-y in a way that's really nice. The way that I watch those music videos, I just watched Everything Everywhere the first time in the same way. I'm like, this is just one long music video. It's like super stylized. Like the editing is really fast. It's almost cut like a trailer or like an ad. Like the whole movie is sort of cut like that. It's not slow at any point. It's rapidly trying to like get your attention, even though you've been sitting there for like 2.5 hours. So I think it's just the format I have a problem with in that long of a movie, because I think the guys are really cool and creative with what they do, but like I just don't need that for like 2.5 hours.
Right. I think that's a big reason why it becomes so exhausting to watch. And that makes sense that they're coming from doing music videos. That makes perfect sense with just
Mhm.
grafting that onto what Everything Everywhere All at Once is.
I would imagine that Swiss Army Man is like similar, but like probably just worse than this movie, right?
I mean, I don't want to say anything without watching it first, which I won't, so I won't say anything.
Okay. Man, have you ever seen that movie, speaking of Daniel Radcliffe, Guns Akimbo?
No,
Do you know what that is?
I've at least heard of it.
It's like Daniel Radcliffe gets, I forget exactly how it happens, but he gets like guns like basically bolted to his hands. Like surgically just,
Oh,
it's kind of gruesome, but he has like guns that are just permanently stuck to his hands now. And he has to figure out how to, I don't know, do something.
looking
It
at
was-
the poster for it, it looks like there's nails
yeah,
going through
like,
the gun, nailing his
kind of
hand.
like a gun stigmata thing going on. But someone recommended it to me. I think it might have been like a tattoo artist that I was at, and I was just like talking to him like while I was getting tattooed, and I was like, yeah, I like movies, you know, that's one of my hobbies. And he's like, oh, you should check out this movie, Guns Akimbo. This movie rocks. So I was like, oh, and he explained the premise. I was like, okay, I'll check that out. And it's one of the few movies that I've like watched and just shut off. Like
Yeah.
I watched maybe like 30 minutes of it, and I'm like, I don't need to see the rest of this. I get it. I get what they're doing.
I find myself doing that a lot more.
Yeah, it's just like you don't want to waste your time.
Yeah.
It's easier now too because they're just everything is just so cyclical in how it references other styles and pop culture and tropes. Like the pool of media is so much larger now that it's more and more likely that you've just seen whatever it is that they're doing in a movie before in some other form.
Mm-hmm.
In a much more obvious form. That old YouTube video that's like everything's a remix. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's something to that too, where it's just like culture is just like recycled. But I think it's even more emboldened now how recycled everything is, just because it's just movies. You know, movies are like recycled movies, whereas before they were recycled from something else. There's just like nothing I haven't seen in movies before, so I'm much more likely to turn something off.
That's true. That's true. And I do get that a lot more often now, where I'm just watching things and I'm like picking it apart. I'm like critiquing it. Just being a real grumpy old Nelly about
I think
stuff
it's
that I
a
watch now.
yeah, I think it's like a combination of like us like getting older
Yeah,
and the fact that it's just stuff is just worse, just
Yeah.
objectively. Like
it's not as good anymore.
it's, I don't want to like be so grumpy that I'm just like, oh, back in like fucking my day when movies were good. But there is something to that. Like the stuff did used to be a little bit better. It's just the actual good stuff is harder to find now because there's like an oversaturation
Mm-hmm.
of everything.
Sure.
So it's like there's too much stuff and I'm grumpier. There's like two things like working against me when I'm watching movies now. So let's see. Well, let me just ask you: is there anything like about the movie that, despite our real pessimistic takes on it, that you want to talk about, or anything in your notes that we didn't discuss?
I mean, like, I don't even know how to approach it, but there's so many great visual gags, you know? Like, a lot of the things that the movie does that are funny are pretty funny.
Yes,
Sausage fingers, the rocks.
the rocks. Oh yeah. The
Yeah.
when they turn into rocks. Yeah,
Like,
I
a
agree.
lot of that works.
I agree. Yeah. It's funny, the movie itself is sort of like an analog to what we were just talking about just there's just too much. The media landscape, like from a macro perspective, is just oversaturated.
Uh-huh.
And this movie is itself sort of oversaturated.
Yeah. They're
But, like-
trying to deliver on the concept of everything everywhere
Right.
all at once.
I will say that the gag of like the everything bagel, like
Uh-huh.
like the bagel is sort of this black hole. It like represents all space and time or something, and for some reason that creates like a void. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on, but like it being like an everything bagel. I hate that joke so much.
I hate that joke too. Yeah.
I hate that that's the joke, that it's like it's an everything bagel, you know? It's like what millennials, I don't know. It's just weak.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
found a lot
weak
of the
joke.
humor not really being my kind of humor.
Yeah. It is more like stupid humor.
Yeah.
And it's why it works well in like a theater play setting, right? Where it's you see the guy like jump over the cubicles to like get the butt plug in him so he can do his like weird like universe jumping thing. Like when you see the guy like slow motion like jump over the cubicles and he has no pants on and it's like blurred out and you see like the butt plug in the foreground. Like in a theater where you're like maybe a little bit buzzed and you're like with a bunch of your friends, you're like losing your shit.
Yeah.
But like you do that once and then the joke's gone. And that's
the second time watching it in your basement alone on a computer screen, you're like, who am I doing this for?
Yeah, exactly. You're not doing anyone any favors. So I think that's the essence of a dumb joke. Is it like works once? It's like it's expendable.
Exactly. I have another note here, and this is a very particular thing for me that I find very annoying. But like here's just a quote. This is the kind of thing that just drives me crazy. Here's a quote. Everything is just a random rearrangement of particles in a vibrating superposition.
Okay.
Get that quantum mechanics shit out of your mouth, you fucking heathen. You don't know what you're like. I hate that. That's so bullshit.
Yeah. Whenever anyone tries to say something like profound combined with like quantum mechanics or like real in-depth like physics stuff, and the movie's clearly not coming from like a scientific perspective at all, it probably sounds like nonsense, but also to me, a layperson, like it just sounds stupid. It just sounds like the movie's just using real world language to talk about something fantastical.
Yeah. And you need to understand that like that sentence is like there's meat behind it scientifically, but they don't know that.
Right.
They're just kind of repeating stuff. That's really my big issue with whenever something does something on like the concept of the multiverse. Like that's a good example of one of these concepts that's a marriage of sci-fi, real science, and then like the culture like talking about those two things and conflating the two. And so that just drives me nuts, like when there's like a conflation between like shit that's just fantastical and also like somewhat grounded in something. And then because the side of it that's like the people that don't know what they're talking about use like the seemingly backing of science to give credence to like the sci-fi components of it that are completely unfounded.
Yeah. I would say that this movie doesn't try too hard to like present itself as anything like other than it is. But what you're describing is certainly like a problem in like modern superhero movies that often involve like multiverse like premises. In that case, it really does seem like the movie and the people behind it are relying on like real world like physics language to give weight to what they're talking about, or to give like some kind of like real meaning to it because it's based in some kind of real perception of science.
Yeah.
That I think is stupid. Like if you're watching like Thor: The Dark World and you have like this nuclear physics character that is just reciting something that the director like briefly read on like Wikipedia, that's dumb.
Yeah,
that's really dumb.
It's a bastardization of a whole field.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And so this doesn't lean heavily into that. I mean, it really just like borrows some of these concepts which had been like brewing
I think
outside the context of this film, but it does use them and lean into it.
It does. I think that this movie, it's more concerned with like sort of the pop part of like sci-fi multiverse stuff. I think that it makes the most sense that it came out in 2022 because you have like so many other like multiverse properties that precede this, that like
Uh-huh.
the concept of a multiverse is just a joke now. And so I think it is in a way like aware of the joke, because you have things like Marvel, Rick and Morty, shit
Oh.
like that. But yeah, it's just like the multiverse, like as a concept in like popular sci-fi culture, has really been like, I would say, played out at this point. And I think the movie on some level is aware that it is like a played out concept, the idea of like infinite universes and them all having every combination of things in them. It leans into that joke in the same way that Rick and Morty clearly does. And I don't know, I feel like on some level the movie is like aware that it's not doing anything original.
I
with
agree.
that.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it makes the humor like better or more enjoyable for me, but I do think it understands what it's doing.
Yeah, I'd agree. That Rick and Morty episode with the multiverse, I dislike it and like it.
Well, they all have the multiverse in them now. Like the whole show is like the multiverse thing.
Is that so? I think I'm like a season.
I think the whole thing, like the backbone of it, is that it's all like infinite universes, and that's what really drives.
You're right about it. You know what I'm thinking of specifically, that one episode where like the screen keeps splitting. Do you remember the one?
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Season 1 or 2.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Notoriously kind of like not an enjoyable episode to watch.
I think that one in particular was like playing on the idea of like, it was the same idea of like branching realities. Like it could go one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I like what the episode did. Like the episode became very unwieldy because of that concept, that structure.
Right.
And I feel like that kind of like became the joke. It's like, oh, it's just like there's too many. This is hard to follow. And it took a long time to explain what this episode was going to be about. And now that we're experiencing it and we're in the middle of it.
This is a great thing to bring up, because I think that the movie that we're talking about also tries to do this. That it on some level it understands like the idea of a multiverse, infinite realities, all happening at the same time, is ridiculous, and therefore would be like hard to actually interpret in any sort of meaningful way. So that's why you said it, like the movie like leans into everything everywhere all at once. That's why the movie is just like a nonstop barrage of stuff. And that Rick and Morty episode, it's the same sort of thing delivered in a different way, where it's like an ununderstandable like barrage of stuff, and it makes the episode sort of not enjoyable to watch, but the episode is sort of okay with it being that. Like it sort of it presents itself as like an unwatchable episode. You know, it has, 48 different like squares of simultaneous things. It's impossible to watch all at once. In any attempt to try and do so or go frame by frame is just not a fun thing to do. But I feel like Everything Everywhere All at Once is sort of delivering you the same thing, but it's presenting it as like entertaining. It's like, isn't this so fun to watch all of this nonsense stuff coming at you like 100 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Nonstop.
Like, what a feast on the eyes. You're looking at sausage fingers 1 second and some rocks.
Yeah, like you love this, don't you?
You
like
love
that's
this,
what,
don't you? Yeah.
That's what that movie's saying. And the Rick and Morty thing is saying like, this is kind of shitty, right? Like you don't want to be doing this anymore.
Yeah. See how unwieldy this is?
Yeah.
You have like 48 boxes on the screen.
Yeah.
You know the funniest part of that episode was when Rick figures out that like what most likely his other version of him is going to try to do is to kill, him.
Yeah.
So he decides that like I need to kill him first. They both come to this conclusion at the same time. They're just like shooting at each other.
Right.
That's too good.
I feel like there's multiple jokes like that in the show, where it's the Rick is like trying to anticipate the other, like another Rick's behavior, and like the same thing is happening on the other end, and so like the actual idea has no origin. It's like a Terminator thing, where it's just this like infinite like loop of how people came to this idea.
Yeah.
I feel like that's used throughout that whole show.
There's I'm doing a rewatch of The Office right now. There's a gag where like Dwight's, for some reason, he's like playing a fight with himself, and like Jim's egging him on, and the joke is that like,
Oh, right.
like, well, how are you gonna defeat yourself? Like, I think like Jim was playing Dwight and Dwight was playing Dwight, and they were like play fighting.
Right.
And they're like, well, we're evenly matched. How is either one gonna win? But Dwight's
Right.
like, no, I
He's
will
like-
win.
He's like punching himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is like that's a real similar joke. What made you start rewatching The Office though? That's like sort of a separate question.
No, just I think Stacy might have prompted it.
Cool. Are you actually kind of going through it? Nice.
We're almost through now. I think we picked it up because like, are you aware of these extended episodes?
Yeah.
They have them on Peacock.
Like the extra content in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe 4 minutes per episode of extra content. And so we were intrigued by that, so we started doing that.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
I
And
like.
the show's great. I love it now more than any other time I've seen it.
Why is that?
I don't know. I just really appreciate it. It's just like a very smart show. I love.
Yeah.
They do a great job of making the world seem real and having continuity. You know, things like having a piece of information from a season ago pop up in
Yeah.
a very subtle way the next season.
It is like a weird fusion of a lot of different things of like realism, really smart humor. Yeah, just good writing overall. And I think that that's part of like why it became an issue in my life and like a lot of people's lives, is it because it represented like a form of comfort. Like you could sort of live vicariously through that show. Like it could sort of become your reality to some degree, where it's just like, yeah, like this seems like a real situation and these characters seem real, and so I feel like kind of safe just watching them. And the whole show is like very safe and bright. So I think it was just a lot of people's like escape drug for a long time.
Oh yeah.
People just kept going back to it as well.
Uh-huh.
I think I could healthily pick up like an Office episode or two now. It's like like being in recovery. Like you just
What's
gotta
the
stay.
last time? So have you like had a moratorium on The Office? What's the last time you've seen it?
Oh, I mean, the last time I saw it was probably like 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. Just because it's like it was like the only show I watched for years. You
Yeah.
just watch it and then you just restart it.
I can totally see how that would be
Yeah.
the case. Like
Yeah.
I could restart it now and just like watch it again.
Yeah. And it's a fun experience just watching that show, but you also realize like we were talking about wasting time earlier. You like get through your like third time watching the Office and you're like, what am I doing? Like with my life.
Right. Yeah.
You
it
know?
really does. It makes you ask those questions.
Yeah.
You're like, I just dropped 120 hours in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's not good. It's if you have any self-awareness at all, you'll like curb that behavior pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
Man,
But yeah, great show. I find myself just enjoying it very thoroughly.
To a degree that's like concerning, right? It's like you do cocaine and you're like, this is awesome. Why would I just not do this all the time? You know?
The characters are just so like well crafted and deep. Like I find myself like saying things about like the motivation of characters that's not strictly supported by anything that I see on screen, but I'll have like theories about what a character is doing or what they're thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that just takes
show-
everything into consideration.
the show lets you do that too.
And the later
Yeah.
seasons, like the writing is so considerably worse that it breaks the immersion. I think that's the biggest issue that I have with them.
Yeah, that's
That
so
people will
right.
do things and you just find yourself saying like, they would never do that. Like
yeah.
a recent one I saw, I think I'm on season 8.
This is after Michael left.
After Michael leaves, some of the office people need to go down to the warehouse and like do some of the shipments for that day.
Mm-hmm.
And right off the bat, like Dwight takes one of the vehicles for
The
hauling
forklifts.
things, the forklift, and drives it into a wall.
Uh-huh.
And that's bullshit because Dwight works on a farm. He should be able to operate heavy equipment. It doesn't make any sense that he wouldn't be able to. And he's not incompetent.
A forklift might be a little considerably different than farm equipment.
I don't think so.
I think it might be a little different. But I will say that what happens right after that, where he like drives it into a what does he do? He drives it into like a wall, like a metal wall, and he immediately just shuts the forklift off and like walks away.
Yeah.
Like he just pretends like it didn't happen. And that doesn't seem like a very like Dwight move, in my opinion. That seems like something that's inconsistent with the character, like in previous seasons. He wouldn't just like abandon the problem. What else? So tell me more about the season that you're in. I'm gonna kind of like jog my Office memory here. I'll like partake a little bit.
Let's see. So Andy became manager this season.
I hate that.
There was all of that
I hate
turnover where it was like Joe as CEO and then Robert California came in. Now he's CEO. He made Andy manager.
I do like Robert California. I think that
he's a great
like,
character.
I think he's like my favorite part of like the newer seasons.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then Andy went to go like, and then it's a will they, won't they with him and the receptionist, Aaron.
That's right. Yeah. Which I'm entirely disinterested in, and like the arc of that story is so weird and sort of unforgiving in some ways.
I wish they wouldn't lean so much on like romantic like storylines. Like, it felt like they thought that they needed to have another Jim and Pam kind of arc to see it through.
Yeah, which is the Jim and Pam thing is like lightning in a bottle. You just like can't recapture it. And so I do admire like the attempt, you know. I think that even they knew like the Jim and Pam thing was like special as far as TV goes, and they were just like, we just got to keep trying to see if we can get something like that to happen again.
Right. Angela, Dwight, Andy. There's like Daryl, Val.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many kind of like B romances.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, right? If you created like the most or one of the most talked about or important like fictional TV relationships as far as like serialized TV goes, you would just keep rolling the dice. Hoping that you got another good one.
It's such a good TV romance, though.
It's arguably the best. You know,
best. I bet the real life actors that their real world relationships are undermined by the existence of this much more ideal, perfect, fictional one.
Yeah, I mean it's like this weird thing where the fan base of The Office like really wants like John Krasinski and Jenna Fisher to like be together. Like they like want to manifest like a fictional relationship, even though both of them are in very committed relationships otherwise. They're like, no, John Krasinski should be dating Jenna Fisher. That's just the way it should be. It makes them crazy.
This is the kind of pressure that royal families have had for centuries. Where it's like the Royal Duchess of Denmark needs to marry the Prince from Wales.
Yeah, that's so funny. It's also like it makes total sense that our version of that, like how the British monarchy's been obsessed over for like the last 1,000 years, ours as Americans would manifest in like a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, it's no real people. It's just like a TV show.
It's who we are.
So what did you say? Andy had just become manager. What else is going
on? And I feel like we're almost done. Like, yeah, he went to go like get together with Aaron after a whole season of them not being together. He drove down to Florida, confessed his love. They got together. He broke up with his ex.
Well, let me ask you about this. This is just going to turn into like an Office like hash podcast, which
already has,
which I'm not complaining about. One of the problems I have with like Andy and Aaron's whole late stage relationship arc is in the beginning they sort of tease it. I think it's even like pre Michael leaving, possibly, like teasing out their affection for one another, and it's like kind of charming in those episodes. And then when Andy becomes manager, he like goes through this whole like rich kid arc of like dealing with his parents and his brothers. You like meet Andy's family. You like dive a little bit more into his backstory. and he like pisses off to like South America or Jamaica or something for like months at a time. Like the whole office like gets mad at Andy because he leaves, and he like goes to some like tropical region and just stays there for a while and kind of pretends like he's still at the office. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think that's coming up still. In my
Oh,
view.
really?
I think like the actor like straight up takes a hiatus from the show, doesn't he? Like he's not in the show for many episodes.
Yes, but the
Like,
way
that's
that the way that they spin it is that he leaves. Like he and Erin goes through this whole thing where she gets mad at him. And the whole office is like mad at him because they see it as Andy sort of shirking his responsibilities. And ultimately, you know, Erin and Andy do end up together. But they like go to great lengths through this device of him going to like a tropical region to really villainize him in a way that I think is just like not redeemable. So like when he goes through all this and everybody is mad at him, they bring him back, and he does go through like a slight crucible like redemption period, but it is the punishment does not fit the crime. Like by the end of it, you're just like, this guy still sucks, and he doesn't deserve to be with Erin. So not only is it not as good of a relationship as the other lightning in the bottle one that we discussed, but it's like it's not even a good one.
Right.
It's not even like a passable one.
It's funny, Andy, like, because early on, do you remember, like, when the character was introduced, he was a very maligned and villainized character.
Yeah, he had like anger issues. He's
had
like
anger issues.
He's straight
like,
up a villain.
He was straight up like trying to sabotage somebody, like in a very big way. I think it might have been Dwight.
And then they turn him into like this weird little like pipsqueak, like artsy kid. Like by the end,
Yeah.
like he had straight up like toxic masculinity stuff going on. Like in the first few episodes that he's in, and his like hair was like more buzz cut, so it kind of fit that more raw, violent side of him. And then his like hair grows out a little bit more. He starts dressing a little bit more snappy, and he's this like weird, like sheltered, rich, elitist kid.
Yeah, kind
by
of
the
preppy.
end. Yeah.
Another point on Andy that I wasn't able to appreciate before, but just now that I'm older and I understand more things, so much I feel like I have a lot more context for the show. Like just the fact that like Andy went to Cornell, comes from a rich family, but he works in this office which is on paper beneath him.
Yeah.
And how that's just funny in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember there's a later episode where you meet his parents, and they like, you know, he goes to great lengths to throw this like garden party. I think that's the name of the episode, garden party.
Yeah, I just watched it recently.
And his parent, he the whole episode is built on Andy trying to impress his parents because he's recently been promoted to the manager, and he wants to like show them that he's worth something because, as you said, it's beneath him. And there's like something that happens where the rest of the office like hears a recording or overhears like through a phone like
baby monitor.
Baby monitor. A private conversation between Andy and his parents where he sort of confides in them, if I remember right, where he's like, I just want to like hear that you guys are proud of me, you know? Really just like earnestly asked for like, I just want your approval and love or something like that. And his dad basically says like, well, I'm not going to give it to you because you suck. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm proud of you when you like work at some paper company, or like if I'm not actually proud of you. He spins it as this thing where like, I'm not going to, you know, tell you something that I don't believe.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, son. Like, you're a manager, like, at a low level, like, paper company. Like, I don't know what you want me to say.
And it sucks so bad that, like, he was faced with that, like, from his own father. In a way that you can't really appreciate with all of, like, the context of his, like, family and success. And also just, like, how pretentious rich people often are. I think that at the time when I watched that for the first time, I was like, okay, like, that sucks, but whatever, I guess. And now I watch it, I'm like, God, that's just what a horrible thing for that character to have to endure. Yeah.
I'm more on the father side. I'm like, Andy, like, you need to stop. Like, you don't.
You can't do that to your children, though, man. You can't, like. I think from a practical standpoint, I am more on the side of, like, yeah, like, what do you want me to say? But, you know, when your kid, like, comes to you and is like, I just want some, like, love and affirmation and, like, some sense that you're okay with what I'm doing, and to deny them that's just like cold. It's just cruel.
Yeah.
So I do practically understand like the standpoint of like the father, but like just the context of it's just so terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't have like I can't empathize at all with Andy and like trying to impress his parents, because I absolutely like do not have that complex in me.
But a lot of people do.
A lot of people do.
It's like an important thing to a lot of people to like be able to gain. It's like kind of a biological thing.
I think also if your parent, if it's because it's a rich family and like they
the
are
standards are
successful
even
and they have
higher.
certain, yeah. You hear about this like that being a thing in kind of affluent families.
Oh, for sure.
The parents are like
they have high expectations.
They'll judge you. Like, yeah, they have high expectations. They'll judge you. They'll tell you if you're not doing well.
Yeah.
They'll compare you to your siblings if like they think they're doing better, and they'll make you feel bad.
Which is just elitism, you know. It's just like not everyone is created equal, like in this like litter of siblings, and therefore you must perform. Like your family group becomes like capitalistic, which is just sick and like horrible. But yeah, it's a normal thing.
Well, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. My family's very proud of me for the most part. Like they're just like very happy.
Yeah,
which
my family is also proud of me.
I have another theory I want to run by you.
I'm all ears.
When Michael leaves the show, he kind of like takes on this very wise, self-aware air to him, which I think is demonstrated best by him giving Oscar this goodbye present, this like shitty scarecrow that he made, this scarecrow doll.
Yeah.
And Oscar's just like, oh, wow, thank you so much. Clearly doesn't like it. And then Michael is it's a cutaway to Michael's
he's like
head.
laughing his ass off.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, like I can't believe he just had to sit there and like accept the gift. And then he made a remark that Oscar has the lowest opinion of me of anyone here. What do you make of this Mike, like this near the end Michael, where he's so much more self-aware than he has ever been on the show?
I think that you're right in that it is certainly more of a thing right at the end.
Yeah.
Because it certainly makes more sense if they're going to pack any more like self-awareness into the character to do it right at the end. Because of so much of what makes him fun is that weird adult childlike juggling act that he does throughout the show. Where it's like he has like moments where he's like completely lucid, and he has these very like wise arcs with people where he's otherwise like a clown. There's like an episode that like leans into this where like Jim is becoming the manager. They're like co-managing. And like Jim sees Michael the way that we see him, and like everyone else in the office sees him up until that point where he's just like a buffoon. You know, he's like a kid. He wasn't socialized enough as a child, and now he's really weird, and he has a lot of weird complexes. And in that episode, the company is like facing bankruptcy and going under. Yeah. And the whole time, Michael is doing a murder mystery game with the rest of the office. Yeah. It's some kind of like southern themed thing, yeah. And Jim is increasingly getting like stressed out about like real time events that like will mean the company is going under or not, or like they have jobs or not. And he's getting increasingly mad at Michael for wanting to play this game, which makes sense. It's like a serious time, serious stuff's going on. And towards the end of the episode, like Jim like pulls Michael into the office. He's like, you need to fucking cut this shit out, man. Like serious stuff is going on. Like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm paraphrasing. with this game. And Michael's basically like, you need to shut the fuck up, because like this game is the only thing keeping these people in this office sane right now.
Uh-huh.
So like it reveals, and Jim very quickly like comes to his side. He's like, yeah, you're right. We need like this distraction, because otherwise we're all just gonna go crazy.
Jim just needed Mike to see that Michael like was in fact taking the situation seriously in his own way.
And so it sort of pulls back the curtain a little bit to where like Michael might be a little bit more aware of what's going on more of the time than we truly realize. It's not to say that he's not a total idiot like in other parts, but like there are these real like lucid wise moments that the character has throughout, and I think they just double down on that towards the end. They're like, this character is like aware in some ways. And so we're just going to like show you some more of that right before he leaves, because it makes the character more special.
You want to hear my theory about this?
Sure. Yeah.
I believe like Michael is self-aware. He is less of a caricature of a person than he appears on camera. The reason that he does appear like such a caricature on camera is that he's essentially performing for the camera the entire show.
Because
every time we see him,
because
it's the document, he's reacting to the documentary crew. He's a person that always wants to be like the life of the party, that like wants to like make himself seem more so than he is. And in attempting to do that over and over again, he always kind of like comes off as ridiculous. And that's a lot of Michael as we perceive him. But, you know, and it's hinted at multiple times, but they're like, I'm sure is a Michael that exists outside of that maybe looks a lot more like the, you know, the end Michael, a lot more self-aware, probably a lot more normal.
Yeah.
Probably less wacky and kind of over the top.
Yeah.
I think the coworkers, like a lot of the time that of the office scenes that we watch, are thinking in their minds like, Michael is being weird because the cameras are here and he's saying things and doing things that he wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
And we can't call them out because we're also on camera.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. And I have like an episode to like prove your thesis.
Yes.
It's the Date Mike episode. It's because the whole premise of that sub character, like Date Mike, is that he doesn't come out until he realizes that he's in a situation like with the other woman. Like they set him up on a date and they show the date like going really well and normal the entire time. And then someone leaks to Michael that he's actually on a date without his knowledge. And like he turns into a caricature of a caricature. And so like, yeah, you just remove that like one more step with the documentary crew, and that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
He only becomes that when he knows that like someone's watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right on.
That's right on.
Crack the code.
So what's keeping you happy this week?
Oh yeah, this segment. Forgot about this. Man, I've been replaying the Far Cry games.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Nice.
Then that new one came out like last year or 2 years ago. The one that has Gus from Breaking Bad. And I wanted to play it, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go revisit like the other ones just to like get my muscle memory back up to snuff, and I like those games. So I replayed Far Cry 3, and I'm currently replaying Far Cry 4.
Nice.
And then I'm gonna skip right to 6 because I don't need to revisit 5.
Great. 5 is the one that we played.
Right, the one set in America.
Yeah.
I think it's the worst.
Montana?
Yeah, I think out of the 3, it's the worst one.
Really?
3, 4, and 5.
It's the only one that I've played, and I remember enjoying it a lot.
I think it's good, generally, but as it compares to the others, I don't think it's as interesting.
Nice.
So you should try.
I mean, for what it offers, like what it has specifically that's different than the rest, the idea of like a military group in America kind of like going to town and like taking over, and like that's what you're fighting against. Super cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yes. It is cool. I think I just don't like the coat of paint that it has. Like it being like the mountainous, like in the mountains of Montana.
Uh-huh.
And like everybody's like kind of like mountain, and like the cult is all these like weird like long hair, bearded, flannel wearing people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be cool if it was set in like, I don't know, like the American South, or like one of the coasts or something, you know, just like that area culturally as it relates to like a militant like cult group is just not interesting. I think they could have done a lot with like when they picked like America. It's going to be America and it's going to be a cult. They just had a lot of options and they picked one of the less interesting ones. But anyways, Far Cry. I've been playing a lot of Far Cry, and 4 is the one I'm on right now. It's set in like a fictional Nepal, and that's really fun.
Have you started the new one yet, or are you still working your way?
Still working my way to it. Which I've been a little slower these last couple weeks. I was actually supposed to play today. My time spent watching Everything Everywhere would have been Far Cry time otherwise. I'll probably play it when we're done here, honestly.
Nice.
But yeah, I would like to get to 6. I'd be interested to see what that one's all about. I need something new. There's also like a few games that are like on my list that I have not played, but am looking forward to. Talking about like being totally exhausted by media and not finding anything good earlier. I'm not really experiencing that same drought in video games.
Okay.
There's like I feel like there's still a healthy amount of games that I could replay, or like new stuff that is coming out that I'm like very interested in playing. So yeah, that's still very sufficiently like a fruitful hobby and like well of media for me.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't been playing video games very much recently. I tried like subscribing to that Xbox Game Pass thing for a few months, which I like. Which the deal is that you just pay a monthly subscription and you can download new games. I played a little bit of that game that the Rick and Morty people made.
Which one's that?
I don't know what it's called, but they made a game. They do the voices. Justin Roiland.
Oh, I've seen that. It's like the guns have like faces and stuff.
Sure.
They like talk to you.
Yeah.
R.I.P. man, Justin Roiland. Actually, not R.I.P. Just fuck that guy.
What?
Oh, he's canceled, dude. He like sent some like very sexually explicit like text messages to like a 16-year-old or something.
Okay. I mean, I thought he died because you said R.I.P.
R.I.P. his reputation.
No, I heard vaguely about that, but not too familiar. What did he do? 16-year-old?
Yeah, he's a sexual predator.
Wow, man. You know what I watched recently? On the subject of sexual predators, I watched that Allen versus Farrow documentary on HBO on Woody Allen.
That's interesting.
Which, if you haven't, like, for a long time, like, I've been like vaguely aware of like accusations against Woody Allen and stuff that he's done before.
Didn't he like?
But it was all very fuzzy.
His stepdaughter or something.
He did do that, and that's what makes it so confusing, because he did marry his stepdaughter, but that's not the thing that he's in trouble for.
He did something else.
How
long ago?
In the 90s.
Okay. See, this is interesting. It's sort of like a similar. I want to hear your take about this documentary, but it's similar to how I think about like the Michael Jackson stuff. Where it's like pretty notoriously, this guy definitely like did some shady shit with like children, and like now there's been like multiple documentaries sort of exposing that very thing, and we as a society, we are just kind of like, okay, yeah, like if a person is sufficiently like in the past and famous or well regarded, they're like almost untouchable. I mean, it's different case by case, but like with seemingly Woody Allen and Michael Jackson specifically, it's like there's always been this sort of background knowledge about bad shit that they were doing, but no one really seemed to care as much.
In Woody Allen's case, and the documentary lays this out pretty clearly, is that like he like proactively went on a kind of media campaign to muddy the waters.
Okay.
And that's exactly how it felt like growing up, and anytime I would hear about it, that's how it was perceived by me, as a very like muddy issue. And there was a thing with like his stepdaughter that he married, and then other accusations. But yeah, the documentary lays it out pretty like irrefutable. It's irrefutable
That like something nefarious did happen.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And it all revolves like around a very specific event. Like it's not the case that like Woody Allen was just continuously like abusing these children when he lived with Mia Farrow. But there were like instances like throughout that relationship of him being weird. But there is like one very specific day where it's alleged that like stuff happened.
Okay.
Which kind of makes it more concrete in a way.
Right.
Like basically he came over once to where his stepdaughters were, and then took her up to a basement and like did stuff to her. And after that happened, Mia Farrow, the mom, like took video of the kid and was like interrogating the kid.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
There
This
were like
documentary sounds really upsetting.
Yeah. It's crazy. But I'm glad that like it's not super explicit. It doesn't like belabor the point about like the explicit stuff that he did, but it did give me like enough clarity and detail on it to like actually come to like a full understanding of what exactly is being alleged.
Why did we start talking about this documentary? There was something that preceded this.
Because Justin Roiland.
That's right.
I said, speaking of pedophiles,
we were talking about video games.
Video games.
You
What's
said
keeping
that
me happy?
You aren't playing as much these days.
Yeah, and I am also having like the debate, which I think anybody that plays video games has, where you ask yourself like, is this worth my time?
Yes.
Could I be doing something else with my time?
Right.
You know, I have that too. But yeah, bottom line, just haven't been doing it very much.
Yeah, I have that same internal debate with like, is this worth my time? But ultimately, it's like a choice. It's weird. It's this like adult thing I've had to realize about like how I engage with video games, because it used to be where I could just play a video game and it was like total euphoria, because I had no sense of like how finite time is.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, if I did, I wouldn't have cared.
That's so right.
So now I have to like consciously like weigh like the importance of like my mental health and like how I get enjoyment out of things with like what I objectively should or shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm like, you know what, I enjoy video games, so I'm going to play it for 2 or 3 hours, and I'm not going to question how that time is being used. That's my time.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. But you have to like say that to yourself beforehand, as opposed to just kind of, I find myself I'm picking up the controller. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you have to like have foresight into your game playing time. Yeah.
What's keeping me honest, you say?
Yeah. what is keeping you happy or honest or whatever?
I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks recently.
Okay, cool. What kind?
Because I think podcasts just kind of suck now.
Yeah, it's hard to find good ones.
I listened to a Keanu Reeves Smartless episode today, and they're just fucking phoning it in to a degree. Like I didn't listen for a very long time, and then this one just came out.
Okay.
And they sound so fucking stupid, and like they're just like not putting any effort into it at all.
Yeah, they're also rich guys. We talked about this, where like we kind of fell off the Smartless train, where I did at least, because slowly and I started to realize that they're so detached from reality, those guys. Like they're just these rich celebrities who like also talk to rich celebrities, and like they're trying to make a podcast which is relatable. And I would think that you would only become like more wise to that like the longer you listen to it.
Yeah. And it seems like they're tired of that also. Like they're also aware that that's what they're doing.
Okay.
There's like this Keanu Reeves episode is like really quite fascinating. There's like a moment where like the conversation's just like not really popping off. It's not feeling like natural. It's not flowing. And then at a certain point, like Will Arnett like comes in with like a new line of questioning, and he like purposely just like gets louder and like more playful in an attempt to just reestablish the energy of the interview, which had just been petering out to that point. But Forrest's repertoire is not, it's not a good rapport. It's not. But yeah, there's always somebody that's aware of that, and it's funny to feel when that happens, because you just like feel their inside of their head going like, oh, this isn't going so well, like I need to like get this back, I gotta
fix this.
Or the audience is going to start getting annoyed, and I'm like, here's a guy who's thinking about me at this very second that I'm listening to this conversation.
Right. And you should, like, as a listener, you should like react to that positively. You're like, yeah, thank you, Will Arnett, for getting this whole thing back on track. But you actually just like, that's so lame. That's so lame that guy's like trying to have a good podcast.
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can feel the production of it.
Yeah. But no, audiobooks, and I should have done this a long time ago, but audiobooks are a good way to go to replace podcast listening.
Yeah.
Because of the mentioned reason that like podcasts, I feel like we've kind of hit the
I think the golden age of podcasts is over.
Right.
It's
exactly.
I remember like a period in like the 2010s where I would just look through iTunes podcasts, and anything with like the NPR badge on the little thumbnail, I was like, I'll just listen to that. Yeah. Just like follow all of those. And they were like pretty good, at least for the time. And now it's like, that's not a reliable way to look through podcasts, and just all podcasts are bad. Yeah.
So I've just finished listening to, I've listened to a bunch of stuff, and I do Audible.
Okay. That's like a subscription, right? You just get unlimited stuff.
It basically gives you one free audiobook a month.
Okay.
Is that more restrictive than you would think?
Is that about your pace? Can you roll over, like if you don't finish a book?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's a little bit restrictive. Like I could listen to more than that. But I like that it sets the pace for me.
Yeah.
And in practice, I do such a bad job of listening to the podcast while it's playing that like what I did, like I got Obama's recent autobiography of his the recent one that he put out, and I just like re-listened to it back to back because I'm like, I missed enough stuff the first time through that I'm just gonna do it again.
Nice.
To fill it in.
I was gonna ask you about that, because my biggest issue with audiobooks versus podcasts is like whenever I'm listening to something, it's usually like something like a podcast. It's usually my attention is split with something else. I just don't sit and listen to a audiobook like you would sit and read a book.
Yep.
So I probably get like half the comprehension that I would otherwise. In a way that makes listening to audiobooks feel kind of inefficient, whereas like if you listen to a podcast, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If you miss something, it doesn't really affect your experience. But it seemingly it could, like in an audiobook. So is that like an issue for you, or do you just listen to them again like you do with the Obama thing?
That's a good question. I think it matters what you're listening to. Like the Obama one didn't really matter that much. Like the absolute worst case scenario is like you're reading some fictional novel where there's a plot, and if like a movie, if you miss part of the plot, you'll be lost for the later part of the movie. But an autobiography, especially for a president who I lived through all his terms, and his book is basically kind of like going through his presidency, you don't really have that issue, and so it was fine in that case. Yeah, I think that's the bottom line. Like, just stay away from fictional narratives, and you'll be okay. So,
okay,
I have a lot
stay
of
away from fictional stuff.
Autobiographies, history. This book called *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari.
Okay,
that's like just a nice. It just like explains the history of the human race from early like pre-human ancestors through.
That sounds cool.
It's good. It's good. It's a nice, like, that's good stuff to know.
Yeah.
All the milestones that we hit as civilization, like agricultural, like technology.
That's great. It's like it's almost like a like social studies class, but one that you're interested in.
Yeah.
I think that this episode should be called like Everything Everywhere All at Once / The Office. The implication being we got too bored talking about the movie.
I also like the title, Everything Everywhere is kind of what the recording has turned into. We've just been talking about everything.
Yeah.
But I like how the title is kind of like a dry humor. It's like you think that we would have taken something, like try to make a pun out of Everything Everywhere and make it form into what the podcast episode has been, but instead we just do that title / The Office.
Yeah. I want to give ourselves permission to like, if we don't like the movie, to either lean into that we don't like it, or be okay with we don't like it, so therefore there's not much to talk about.
Yeah.
So like, let's just talk about something else.
I'm okay with that too, which is what we did, because I don't think I could have like even had an hour of conversation about the movie.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, we talked about the movie, so we can title it for the movie, and we've done our due diligence.
I'm taking notes from Your Kickstarter Sucks, which is like the most frequented podcast I've been listening to recently, because it's seemingly like the only podcast that just is not trying to do anything. It has like a very loose premise, and it's just two dudes shitting around. But their whole like the titling mechanic for how their podcasts work is so loose. Like, they will mention the title once for maybe like a few minutes, like in the duration of their podcast. But certainly the whole podcast in no way revolves around the title.
Yeah.
It's just like a vehicle to like, this is just like one thing that we mentioned in this week's episode. But like,
and I think that's fine.
Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah.
I would love to have the personality that like garnered that kind of like charisma in a podcast medium, you know, where it's just like people just tune in because I'm like interesting to listen to. They could give a shit about like what I'm talking about. I'm just
alas, you're pretty boring.
I'm just gonna believe that about myself and manifest. Thanks for listening. Filmhole is produced by just us, myself and Raul. Our music is by W, that's underscore the word double and 2 U's. Get Filmhole wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like it, rate it. If you hate it, maybe don't. Thanks again. See you next time.